Please leave a comment where you are watching from. When you're 15, home alone, and convinced nothing can touch you, the rules your parents leave behind feel less like boundaries and more like background noise. That Friday afternoon was no exception. The house was mine. My parents had taken my little brother to a full-day soccer tournament in another town, and for once, they didn't insist on dragging me along. I promised to stay in, lock the doors, not answer for strangers. All the usual, don't die while we're gone rules. I agreed to every one. I even meant it at the time. But 2 hours into my so-called freedom, I was already bored out of my mind. At first, it was thrilling. The silence, the privacy, the chance to roam the house without a toddler tugging on my arm or parents checking in every 10 minutes. I'd made popcorn, sprawled on the couch in my socks, and watched mindless TV until the sun started to dip behind the trees out back. That's when my phone buzzed. "Yo, come through, Matt's house, PPL are here." My friend Lucas. His texts were always lowercase, always urgent, and I was always willing to follow. I hesitated for about 5 seconds. I thought about my parents' warnings, specifically the one that said do not leave the house. But I told myself it was only for a little while. What could possibly go wrong? I threw on my hoodie, slipped into my sneakers, and left through the front door without even glancing at the lock. In my excitement, I didn't just forget to lock up, I left the door half cracked open. That decision would come back to haunt me. Lucas's place was only a 10-minute walk. By the time I got there, the sun was gone, and his porch light flickered weakly in the early evening darkness. There were maybe 6 or 7 of us, lounging in the basement, playing video games and tossing jokes around like we were immortal. I forgot about home, about the silence, about everything. It wasn't until almost 9 p.m. that I remembered I was supposed to be back. I didn't even tell anyone goodbye. I just grabbed my jacket and started walking, a creeping sense of unease gnawing at my gut like something was off, but I couldn't say what. When I reached my street, everything looked normal, peaceful. The soft glow of porch lights dotted the neighborhood. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. But as I stepped up my driveway, a strange tightness gripped my chest. The door was exactly how I left it, open. My stomach dropped. I stepped inside and immediately noticed things weren't right. The air in the house felt disturbed. Heavy. The kind of pressure you feel when someone's watching you, even if you don't see them. Then I saw the kitchen. Cabinets flung open. Utensils scattered across the counters. A chair pulled back from the table at an odd angle. Someone had been inside. Maybe still was. I whispered, "Hello," into the stillness. No answer. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the pounding of my heart. For a moment, I stood frozen at the threshold between the kitchen and the living room, trying to decide whether to flee or search the house. My instincts screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. Then the phone rang. The old landline we barely used. The one in the hallway near the stairs. It wasn't connected to caller ID. It rarely rang. But now, its shrill tone sliced through the silence like a knife. I picked it up with shaking fingers. "Hello?" No answer. Just breathing. Slow. Deep. Wet. I swallowed. "Who is this?" The breathing continued. "Look, I'm not alone," I lied. "My dad's upstairs." A pause. Then the voice spoke, low and rasping. "We both know that's a lie." The line went dead. A creak followed. From upstairs. The sound of a floorboard straining under weight. I backed away from the staircase, nearly tripping over the corner of the rug. "Hello?" I called again, barely more than a whisper. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Heading toward the top of the stairs. I didn't wait to see what followed. I turned, burst through the back door and ran. Barefoot across the cold grass, through the yard, into the woods behind our house. Branches slapped my face, tore at my hoodie. I didn't stop. Couldn't. I didn't turn back until I reached the neighbor's porch and pounded on their door with trembling fists. Mr. Brenner opened it, wide-eyed at the sight of me. I collapsed into his entryway, gasping for breath, unable to explain right away what had happened. The police arrived 20 minutes later. The front door to my house was wide open. They went inside with flashlights drawn, calling out. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry. No prints. No suspect. But the chairs were still out of place. The cabinets were open. The table knife I hadn't noticed missing was found stuck into the wall beside the staircase, at shoulder height. Right where I would have been if I'd walked up the stairs. I didn't go back into that house for 2 days. I couldn't. My parents blamed me for leaving the door open, sure, but even they couldn't explain the phone call. The knife. I was never left home alone again for a long, long time. It started off as one of the quietest weekends I'd ever experienced. My parents and younger sister had gone out of state for her volleyball tournament. 3 days. 2 nights. I was 17 and had never stayed home alone that long before, but I was excited. No chores, no noise, no one in my space. Just peace, quiet, and total freedom. The first night went exactly how you'd expect for a teenager left alone with no supervision. Junk food, horror movies, and an embarrassingly large pile of popcorn spilled into the couch cushions. I stayed up way too late, nearly 2:30 a.m., half drifting off in the middle of some slasher movie that was more funny than scary. Eventually, I gave in, turned everything off, and stumbled upstairs to bed. That's when I felt it. It wasn't anything I saw or heard. It was a feeling. One of those strange, instinctive alarms that triggers in your chest before your brain can explain why. I was halfway under my covers when it hit, that weird pressure like someone was watching me. Not just watching, but watching from inside the room. I sat up and looked around. My bedroom door was closed. The closet was open, but only because I'd never developed the discipline to keep it shut. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing was moving. And yet, the feeling wouldn't go away. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling for what must have been half an hour before I finally fell asleep. The next day was uneventful. I kept the lights on even though it was bright out. I binge-watched random shows, ate cold pizza for breakfast and lunch, and scrolled endlessly through my phone to avoid thinking too hard about the night before. I told myself it had just been a late-night paranoia spiral. Nothing more. But that uneasy pressure returned around dusk. It started subtle. A weird itch in the back of my mind. Like I had left something important unfinished, except I couldn't remember what. I kept glancing at the windows, expecting to see someone standing in the backyard. I locked all the doors twice, and even walked a full lap around the outside of the house, flashlight in hand. Nothing. No signs of anything unusual. But I didn't sleep well that night either. I woke up around 2:50 a.m. The room was dark and quiet, but I was suddenly wide awake, heart already pounding. At first, I thought I'd heard something. Then I realized it wasn't inside, it was outside. Footsteps. Soft, slow, measured footsteps. We have a gravel path that curves around the side of the house and down toward the woods behind it. That's where the sound was coming from, that crunching of rocks beneath shoes, growing steadily closer. I moved to the window and peeled the blinds just a little. The backyard was flooded in soft moonlight, silver and cold. At first, I didn't see anything. Then my eyes adjusted. There was a man walking along the path. He wasn't rushing or trying to be stealthy. He walked slowly, almost calmly, with his hands at his sides, head slightly tilted. He stopped just before the edge of the woods. Then he looked up, right at me. Even though I couldn't see his face clearly, I knew. Somehow, he knew I was watching him. I dropped to the floor. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, curled beneath the windowsill, barely breathing. I kept waiting to hear something. The door creak open, glass breaking, footsteps climbing the stairs. But nothing came. Eventually, I crawled back into bed, not because I felt safe, but because I didn't know what else to do. I never fell back asleep. The next morning, I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing. I wanted to believe it had been a shadow or a trick of the light. But I couldn't let it go. I went outside after the sun came up and walked to the spot where he'd been standing. There were no footprints. The gravel made it hard to tell, and the grass beyond was still wet with dew. But there was a tree, a thick old pine, and on its trunk, right where the man had stood, was a long, fresh scratch. Thin and deliberate, carved into the bark. Not a fallen branch. Not a natural mark. A sign. I went back inside and locked everything, again. That night, I left every light in the house on. I didn't care about the electric bill. I kept the TV low, more for background noise than entertainment. Around midnight, I turned on every lamp upstairs too. I even locked the bedroom door and jammed the desk chair under the handle like some makeshift barricade. I still didn't feel safe. Around 3 a.m., the power went out. Everything went black in an instant. The TV died. The lights blinked off. Even the fridge stopped humming. I was frozen on the couch, the remote still in my hand. At first, I thought maybe a fuse had blown. Then I remembered it wasn't storming. It hadn't rained. The sky was clear. That was when I heard the breathing. It came from just outside the living room window. Slow. Steady. Close. I didn't move. I didn't even dare to look. Then the tapping started. Soft and deliberate. Not frantic, not threatening. Just intentional. Fingernails against glass. Tap, tap, tap. My body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. It was like my muscles had locked up. Then I heard the whisper, a voice so close it could have been inside the room. I see you. I bolted. I don't remember getting off the couch. 1 second I was frozen. The next, I was sprinting up the stairs. I locked myself in my bedroom, shoved the dresser in front of the door, and curled into a ball on the floor with my phone clutched to my chest. The power came back on at 5:13 a.m. I know that because the microwave beeped downstairs, and that sound nearly gave me a heart attack. After the sun came up, I crept downstairs like a mouse afraid to set off a trap. Everything looked untouched. No windows were broken, no doors ajar. But on the back patio door, in the center of the glass, written in something oily and gray, were the words, "Don't turn around." I didn't go near the door. I didn't even open the blinds that day. That was the last night I spent alone in that house. I told my parents something vague when they came home, said I thought I saw someone outside and it freaked me out. I didn't mention the breathing, or the tapping, or the whisper. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed even now, I think about that man. The way he moved so slowly. The way he knew where I was. The way he never tried to get in. Just stood there, just watched, like he was waiting for something. A few weeks later, my dad had a technician come out to look at the power. Everything checked out. Nothing wrong. No outages in the area that night. We have a backup generator now, just in case. But I still keep a flashlight by my bed. And I still get up some nights to check the windows, just to be sure. The woods behind our house are thick. Dark. Endless. I haven't seen him again. City nights have a certain rhythm. Out in the suburbs, silence is expected. In the city, silence makes you nervous. It's not supposed to be quiet. It's supposed to buzz, cars in the distance, muffled shouting down the block, the occasional siren wailing through. That's the sound of everything being normal. The night it happened, I remember thinking how off the silence was. I was in my final year of high school, and my parents were out of town for the weekend. They were attending a wedding 2 hours away, and had booked a hotel to stay the night. My older brother was working the night shift at a warehouse job he'd just started. That left me, the youngest, alone in our 2-story brick row home on the edge of a rough East Coast neighborhood. I didn't mind. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. I had a plan. I'd been thinking about it all day at school. A night of PlayStation on the big TV, junk food from the corner takeout place, maybe a horror movie if I had the energy later. A proper solo hangout night. And best of all, I'd have my dog with me. Cecil was an old beagle. Lazy, overweight, and way past his prime, but he'd been with our family since I was 9. He was calm, sweet, and had a habit of curling up beside me wherever I parked myself. He wasn't much of a barker, and he'd never howled like beagles are supposed to. He just liked to sleep and beg for scraps. That night, he was my only roommate. I placed the takeout order for pizza around midnight and devoured it in the living room. Cecil was already snoring beside me when I finished my last slice. I left the crusts for him on a napkin, and he sniffed them before slowly chewing each one with his aging teeth. By 1 a.m., I was half asleep on the couch. The TV still glowed in the dark, and Cecil had settled his head in my lap, his warm body rising and falling with each breath. I remember how peaceful it felt, that rare kind of contentment you only notice right before everything changes. Then came the first bang. It wasn't dramatic, just a quick thud, like something metal being nudged or kicked. It came from the alleyway that ran behind our house, the kind of sound you might ignore if you live in a neighborhood like mine. I figured it was probably a raccoon knocking over a trash can, or some drunk stumbling past our back fence. Cecil lifted his head, but didn't move otherwise. "Relax, buddy," I murmured, gently petting his ear. "Just the city doing city things." He laid his head back down, and I tried to do the same, mentally checking out, letting the glow of the TV soothe me. Then came the second bang. Much louder. More direct. Cecil exploded off the couch. He didn't bark, he growled. A deep, guttural sound I had never heard from him in all the years we'd had him. His hackles stood up along his back like a bristled brush. I froze. He sprinted to the basement door and threw himself at it, growling, barking, snarling like he'd gone rabid. I'd never seen Cecil move that fast. Not when chasing squirrels. Not when someone rang the doorbell. Not ever. And that's when I heard it, the third bang, followed by a metallic rattle and the unmistakable sound of a handle being shaken. There's a door in our basement that leads out to the back alley. It's old. Rusted. We never use it. It sticks even when you have a key. And someone was trying to open it. My stomach dropped. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. The kind of dread that makes you feel like your feet are buried in concrete. Then came the voice. Low. Angry. Muffled through the floor. Come on, open son of a... Cecil barked even louder, slamming against the basement door like he wanted to go through it. And I remembered something an old neighbor once told us about the area. If someone tries the door and leaves, they wanted your stuff. If they keep trying the door after it doesn't open, they want you. That voice hadn't sounded like someone leaving. I bolted upstairs and grabbed the wooden baseball bat I kept under my bed. I didn't even think of calling the cops. I was a dumb teenager who watched too many movies where the hero handles things on his own. I crept back to the basement door. Cecil was still there, wild-eyed, drool hanging from his mouth, ears pinned back. His body was shaking, not from fear, but from rage. I'd never seen my sweet, sleepy dog like this. And then silence. The banging stopped. The handle stopped rattling. I held my breath. Cecil stood frozen, still growling softly. Then came footsteps. Running footsteps. Retreating. Someone was running away. I didn't chase. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, heart pounding in my ears, holding a bat I didn't know how to use. Eventually, I peeked through the front window. Nothing. No sign of anyone in the alley, or the street, or anywhere nearby. I didn't sleep that night. Cecil eventually calmed down and climbed back onto the couch with me, but he didn't snore. He sat upright, facing the basement door, eyes wide, ears twitching at every sound. He stayed that way until the sun came up. When my brother came home in the early morning, I told him everything. We went down to check the basement door together. The wood was warped. Not cracked, not broken, bent. The rusted frame was twisted like someone had rammed it. When my brother went to pull the door open, it didn't resist like usual. It just fell off the hinges. That guy had been one solid shove away from getting into the house. And Cecil had scared him off. We never caught whoever it was. We didn't file a report. I didn't even tell my parents the full story. They would have probably lost their minds if they knew how close it got. But I'll never forget that look on Cecil's face, that moment he transformed from a sleepy house pet into something feral. Protective. Dangerous. Some people say it's just instinct, that any dog would have done the same. Maybe. Maybe not. But I knew Cecil. He'd never even barked at the mailman. It felt like something deeper, like he knew something wasn't right. Like he sensed what I hadn't. That someone out there didn't want to just steal a TV or a laptop. They were coming for me. And old, fat, lazy Cecil was the only one who stood between us. He died 2 years later, peacefully, with his head in my lap. We still have his collar hanging in the hallway. Sometimes, when the wind whistles through the alley the wrong way and makes the walls creak at night, I glance at it. I swear I can almost hear that growl again. Low. Steady. Protective. Reminding me what could have happened, if not for him. There's something uniquely vulnerable about being watched when you think you're alone. It's not just fear, it's something colder. A kind of stillness that seeps under your skin and makes your body feel suddenly foreign, like it doesn't belong to you anymore. That's how it felt the night I saw the man at the door. It had been a normal Tuesday. I'd come home from work, fed the dogs, made dinner. Nothing unusual. I live alone in a first-floor apartment tucked into a quiet neighborhood. My place opens straight to the outside. No lobby, no hallway. Just a small patch of grass leading to a thin parking lot, and beyond that, a strip of woods that looks more decorative than dangerous. By the time the sun went down, the house was calm. My 3 dogs were scattered around the living room, half asleep, the smallest one snoring softly from the couch. I was curled up with a blanket and FaceTiming my friend Steph. We weren't talking about anything important, just the usual back and forth we did most nights when neither of us wanted to feel alone in our silence. Then I heard it. A faint rustling, like dry leaves being stepped on, followed by the sound of my dogs springing to life. They charged toward the back door, growling and barking as if someone had knocked, only nobody had. I muted the TV and stood up. The barking intensified. All 3 dogs were planted in front of the sliding glass door that led to my backyard. Their bodies were stiff, heads low, the kind of posture they only took when they were afraid. Not playful, not curious. Guarding. At first, I couldn't see anything. Just the dark yard beyond the glass, and the dim reflection of my living room in the pane. Then my eyes adjusted. There was a man standing there. Not walking. Not approaching. Just standing. 3 feet away. Facing the glass. Facing me. He wasn't looking at the dogs. He didn't react to the noise. He didn't even flinch. His eyes were locked on mine. It took a second for my brain to register the expression on his face. He was smiling, but not in any way I'd ever seen before. It wasn't polite or friendly or even threatening. It was empty, like his face was wearing a smile the rest of him didn't feel. I stared, frozen. I didn't say anything. My dogs barked louder, more frenzied now, their nails clicking on the floor as they lunged against the glass. Still, the man didn't move. Steph's voice crackled from the phone. "What is it?" "There's someone at my back door," I whispered, too quietly at first for her to hear. "What? What do you mean?" Her voice rose with concern. I lifted the phone so she could see. Her breath caught. "Jesus, call the cops. Right now." I didn't even hang up. I set the phone down on the counter, fumbled with shaky fingers to unlock it, and dialed 911. I gave them my address. I told them a man was outside, staring into my apartment. I told them he hadn't tried to come in yet, but he wouldn't leave. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line. That's when it got worse. As I turned back toward the door, I realized the man wasn't just smiling. He was mouthing something. His lips were moving slowly, deliberately. I couldn't hear anything. The glass muted everything, but I could see his mouth forming the words again and again. "Don't look away." At first, I thought I was reading it wrong. But the more I stared, the clearer it became. Over and over, same movement, same silent warning. "Don't look away." I didn't know what to do. Every instinct told me to run to the bedroom, lock the door, crawl under the bed. But I couldn't move. I didn't want to lose sight of him, like if I turned around, he might disappear. Or worse, reappear somewhere else. He kept mouthing the words. His smile never wavered. The dogs eventually stopped barking. They just stood there, tails low, growling. They sensed what I did, that he wasn't normal, that something wasn't right. The dispatcher kept asking me questions. "What does he look like? Has he moved? Is there a weapon?" I answered as best I could, but my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. He looked normal at a glance. Medium build. Plain black hoodie. Dark jeans. No visible weapons. But there was something off about him. Something I couldn't put into words. It was the stillness. Like he wasn't a person but a presence. Like he was just a mask stretched over something else. The cops were on their way. I knew that. I'd heard the dispatcher radio them. But every second stretched like a minute. Time slowed down in that unbearable way it only does during real fear. The kind that steals your ability to reason. I blinked. He was gone. I don't know how. I never looked away, not even for a second. But in the span of a blink, literally, he vanished. No footsteps. No movement. Just gone. I stayed by the door for another few minutes, eyes scanning the yard, heart in my throat. I expected to see him walking away. I didn't. The yard was empty. Quiet. Still. Then the sirens came. Loud and too late. 2 officers arrived and swept the area with flashlights. They checked the yard, the street, even walked the edge of the woods behind the apartment. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone. I showed them the security camera footage from the porch cam, the one facing the parking lot. He never showed up on it. There was a gap in the feed, 1 solid minute of black screen. Then it resumed like nothing happened. I should have felt relieved. But I didn't. Because that night wasn't the end of it. The next morning, I noticed something new on the glass door. At first, I thought it was a smudge, maybe from the dogs' noses. But when I leaned closer, I realized it wasn't a smudge. It was a word, written in the condensation from where he had been standing. Good. That's all. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, the word already fading as the morning light warmed the glass. I felt sick. It was like he knew I hadn't looked away. Like I'd passed some kind of test. The police followed up once. I told them everything again. They nodded and wrote it all down, but they didn't seem to know what to make of it either. I asked if they thought it was someone who'd done this before. They said there weren't any reports like mine. At least, none that had ended like mine. I haven't seen him since. But I've changed. I don't sit on the couch with my back to the door anymore. I keep the curtains closed at night. I sleep with my bedroom door locked and a bat under the bed. You get used to ignoring random sounds when you live in an apartment complex. People are always coming and going. Someone's always slamming a door, starting a car, walking too heavily above your ceiling. But this was different. This wasn't just noise. It started with the doorbell. Just one ring. It was early evening, 8 p.m. or so, and I was in the kitchen, making dinner after work. The doorbell rang while I was stirring pasta, and at first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone dropped a package. I live alone on the ground floor, so I figured I'd missed the delivery guy walking past the window. I wiped my hands, went over to the door, and looked through the peephole. No one was there. I looked out the front window. My apartment opens directly to the outside, with a patch of grass, a sidewalk, and a small parking lot just beyond. There was no one in sight. Not on the walkway. Not in the lot. Not near the woods just beyond that. Just empty air and dusk settling in. I opened the door and peeked out for a moment, more curious than concerned. Still nothing. So I went back to my dinner and didn't think much more about it. Until the second time. A few hours later, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was more insistent, 3 quick chimes in a row. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. Then nothing. It jolted me. I was in the living room with the TV on, half asleep on the couch, and the sudden sound cut through the quiet like a blade. My heart was racing before I even stood up. I moved slower this time. Quiet. When I reached the door, I didn't open it. I just looked through the peephole again. No one. I checked the window. The same. I even stepped out for a few seconds onto the stoop and looked around. Just a light breeze in the trees, empty cars in the parking lot, and silence. The apartment above me was dark. So were the ones to the side. It wasn't until I got back inside that I realized something that sent a cold ripple down my spine. I'd heard the doorbell while I was in the living room. That meant whoever rang it had walked up within feet of me, right outside the window behind my couch, and I'd never heard a thing. No footsteps. No gravel crunch. No movement at all. That's when I locked the door. The rest of the night passed without anything else strange. I checked the door a couple more times before bed, but everything was still. No new rings. Nothing out of place. But I didn't sleep well. Every sound outside made me tense. Every creak of the walls made me sit up and listen. The next night, it happened again. It was later this time, closer to midnight. I'd just gotten out of the shower when the doorbell rang. Once. Then again. Then again. Each ring was faster than the last, urgent and aggressive. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. Then silence. I dried off quickly, threw on clothes, and walked to the door with my phone already in hand. Again no one. I didn't open the door this time. I just watched. Waited. I felt watched. Like something just out of sight was waiting for me to turn away. But the sidewalk was empty. Eventually, I went back to the couch. I left the lights on. I turned off the TV so I could listen for movement. I sat there, phone clutched in my hand, staring at the front window. And then, just before 1 a.m., I saw him. A man, standing a few feet away from my front door. He wasn't facing me directly. He stood at an angle, half facing the side wall of the apartment, head slightly turned. Still. Motionless. Like a statue. My breath caught in my throat. He was tall. Thin. Wearing dark clothes, maybe a jacket. His face was obscured by shadow, but I could make out the pale skin and a bald or shaved head. I couldn't tell how old he was. I couldn't tell what he wanted. And that was the worst part. He didn't move. Didn't ring the bell. Didn't try the handle. He just stood there. I turned off the lamp beside me and watched from behind the curtain, my body tense like I was ready to bolt. But I couldn't move. I was afraid that if I did, if I turned away even for a second, he would be gone. Or worse, he'd be inside. I don't know how long I stood there. 10 minutes? Maybe more. Time lost all meaning. Finally he moved. Not toward me. Not away. He simply turned and began walking slowly across the lawn. Past the sidewalk. Across the parking lot. Then, without hesitation, he walked straight into the woods. Not on a path. Not along a trail. Just into the trees. And vanished. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked until the sun came up. The image of him, the way he stood, the way he walked, it replayed in my head over and over again. There was no reason for him to be there. No car. No apartment light turning on. Just him. I tried to tell myself he was just lost. Or mentally ill. Or maybe it was some elaborate prank, though I didn't know who would go through that much effort just to freak someone out. But the part that still haunts me? He never looked at me. Never made eye contact. Never smiled. Never said a word. And that somehow made it worse. Because it wasn't like he was trying to scare me. It was like he didn't care I was watching. Like he wasn't there for me, but for something else entirely. I filed a report the next day. The officer who took it was polite, but clearly skeptical. No security footage. No known suspicious persons in the area. No crimes committed. They said they'd keep an eye out and left it at that. Days went by. Then a week. Nothing happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept the curtains closed every night. Left lights on in the hallway. Slept with the TV on just for noise. I installed a camera above the door, one of those smart cams that records whenever there's motion. It didn't catch anything. Until 3 weeks later. I was at work when I got the alert. Motion detected at front door. It was 3:42 a.m. I opened the app immediately, heart racing. The footage was 22 seconds long. The video showed my front stoop. Empty. Then, a faint flicker of movement in the far corner. The image glitched slightly. And just like that, he was standing there, right in front of the door. No walking into frame. No approaching footsteps. Just there. Still. Looking straight ahead. Not at the camera. Not at the door. Just ahead. Then the video glitched again. And he was gone. I don't remember much of the rest of that day. I barely got through work. I didn't even go home that night. I crashed at a friend's place across town. I never saw him again. But I think about him all the time. I moved out of that apartment 6 months later. I told myself it was because I needed more space. But that was a lie. The real reason was simpler. I couldn't sleep there anymore. Because some nights, usually around 3 a.m., I'd wake up suddenly, heart racing, and know something had changed. I'd feel that quiet pull, that pressure you can't explain, like someone standing just outside the edge of vision, like someone waiting to be let in. And even now, from my new place, with new locks and a new number, and curtains that never open after dark, I still sometimes wake up at 3:42 a.m. and think about the man at the door, and wonder, what would have happened if I had answered? It happened almost 10 years ago, but even now I can't look out into the trees behind my parents' house without feeling like something is watching me. Something quiet, patient, something that knows I saw it once. I was 15 when it happened. It was a Thursday afternoon in early fall, still warm during the day, but you could feel the cold sneaking in through the cracks at night. School had let out just after 3, and by 3:30 I was home, backpack dumped by the front door, jacket tossed onto a kitchen chair, already halfway through a bowl of cereal that technically counted as my second lunch. Both my parents worked in the city. They usually didn't get home until after 6, sometimes later if traffic was bad. I had the place to myself for a few hours every afternoon. I was used to it. Our house was a 2-story place at the edge of a neighborhood that didn't quite know what it was. One side had neatly trimmed lawns and polite driveways. The other backed up into dense woods that stretched for miles. No trails. No fences, just a thick line of trees that stood there like they were guarding something. I'd grown up with those woods. I used to play in them when I was younger, building forts out of sticks, pretending I was a soldier or an explorer. But somewhere around age 12 I stopped. I don't remember why. I just did. One day I went out there, and it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt older, heavier. So when the black SUV pulled into our driveway that Thursday, and I saw 5 men inside, for getting out, one staying in the driver's seat, my first thought wasn't that they were lost. It was that they were deliberate. I'd never seen the car before. It was big, dark, tinted windows. Newer model. Not something that looked like it belonged in our neighborhood. The 4 men who stepped out didn't say anything. Didn't knock. Didn't seem confused. They just stood there, looking at the house. Then they started walking, not toward the front door, but around the side of the house, toward the backyard. My heart picked up a little. I ducked away from the front window and moved to one of the side ones that looked out over the yard. I crouched down, careful to stay out of sight, and peeked through the blinds. They were moving slowly, not sneaking, but not rushing either. One of them looked up at the second floor. One paused near the back steps, like he was listening. Then all 4 of them walked past the fence line and into the woods. They didn't stop, didn't look around, just walked straight in like they'd been there before. The SUV backed out of the driveway and drove away. Just like that. Gone. I stood frozen for a long time after that. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my parents. I don't know why. It didn't feel like something urgent at the time. It felt more like I'd witnessed something I wasn't supposed to. And somehow, calling someone would mean acknowledging it, making it real. By the time my parents got home, it was dark. I told them, kind of half laughing, that a weird car pulled up and some guys walked into the woods. My dad raised an eyebrow but shrugged it off. Probably hunters, he said. People sneak in there all the time. But they weren't carrying rifles. They weren't wearing orange. And they didn't come back out. At least, not that day. The next afternoon, I came home from school again. Same routine. Backpack, cereal, TV. Until I walked past the sliding door in the kitchen and saw movement in the backyard. I froze. There, at the edge of the woods, just beyond the first row of trees, stood one of the men from the SUV. Alone. Facing the house. Facing me. He didn't wave. Didn't move. Just stood there, head slightly tilted. Like he was studying me. I backed away from the door, careful not to make noise. My mouth had gone dry. I grabbed my phone and ducked down behind the kitchen counter before calling my dad. He answered after a few rings. I kept my voice low. Dad, that guy's back. The one from yesterday. He's standing in the backyard. Just watching. He paused. I could hear the change in his tone. Did you lock the doors? Yes. I'm calling the police. Stay low and stay inside. Don't talk to him. Don't go near the windows. He hung up. I crouched there for 10 minutes, counting every tick of the wall clock. Every creak of the floorboards upstairs. Every gust of wind against the house. I didn't hear the man leave. I didn't hear anything. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They searched the yard. The edge of the woods. Nothing. No footprints. No sign of anyone. My parents got home right after. They were upset, obviously, not at me but at the situation. My mom kept repeating, "Who just stands there like that?" And my dad kept trying to stay calm, like he didn't want me to see how tense he was. We installed motion lights that weekend. Put up a couple of cheap security cameras. But nothing ever showed up. No cars. No people. No alerts in the night. It was like he vanished. But I never forgot the way he looked. Not what he was wearing. I couldn't even tell you if he had on a hat. It was the stillness. The way he stood with his arms at his sides, perfectly relaxed, like he had all the time in the world. Like he wasn't waiting for anything. He was just watching. Eventually life moved on. The police never found anything. My parents dropped it. The neighbors didn't report seeing anything unusual. But I started keeping the blinds closed all the time. I never played in the woods again. Sometimes, I wonder if they came back. Not all of them, just him. Sometimes, I wonder if he was ever really gone. Because here's the thing I never told anyone, not even my parents. About a week after it all happened, I was walking through the upstairs hallway late at night, on my way to the bathroom. It was around 2 a.m., and I didn't bother turning on the lights. I'd made that walk 1,000 times. As I passed by the guest room, something caught my eye. The curtains were open, and in the moonlight, reflected in the window, I saw something. Not inside the house. In the glass. Behind me. A shape. A tall figure. Just standing there in the hallway. When I turned around, there was nothing there. I still have dreams about the man's face. Not what it looked like exactly, but the way it felt to look at him. Like seeing something you weren't supposed to. Something wrong. I was 12 when it happened, the summer before I started high school. Both my parents worked, and most days I was left alone for a few hours during the late mornings until my mom got home in the early afternoon. We lived in a quiet neighborhood. Lots of trees, slow traffic, the kind of place where people walked their dogs every evening and waved to each other whether they knew your name or not. I liked it that way. It was boring but safe. That morning, it was especially quiet. A hot day, sun beating down early, barely any breeze. I decided to sit outside in the front yard with a book. I dragged one of the lawn chairs into the shade under our tree and got comfortable. I sat there for a while, maybe an hour, when I noticed a black sedan driving slowly down the street. Slower than normal. It wasn't unusual to see cars pass, but this one felt off. It was an older car. 4-door. Tinted windows. Nothing flashy. But it was moving at a crawl, like the driver was looking for an address, or maybe someone. It passed me, turned the corner at the end of the street, and disappeared. I told myself it was nothing. But less than 5 minutes later, it came back, this time from the opposite direction. Again, it slowed as it passed my house. I looked up from my book and locked eyes with the driver, just for a second. A man. Pale. Short hair. I couldn't see his eyes behind his sunglasses, but I could tell he was looking directly at me. Then he drove on. That time it did feel weird. I stared after the car until it was gone. My hands were tight around the book now, even though I hadn't turned a page in a while. I waited. Nothing happened. After a few minutes, I shook it off. Probably someone lost. A new driver learning the area. Or maybe a delivery person. I went inside to get a drink and cool off, but I left the chair outside. I stood in the kitchen, pouring lemonade, when I heard the sound again. Tires on pavement. Slow. Cautious. I stepped to the window and looked out. The black sedan was in my driveway. All the way at the back. Just sitting there. Engine on. Windows up. I couldn't see inside this time. I ducked down immediately, heart pounding. I waited a few seconds, peeked again. Still there. No one got out. I don't know how long it stayed, maybe a full minute. Maybe 2. Then slowly it backed out. Turned. Drove off. It didn't come back. Not that day. I didn't tell my parents when they got home. I felt stupid, like maybe I was imagining the weirdness of it. Like maybe he had the wrong house, or was just turning around, or... No. That car stopped. He saw me. I knew that much. The next few days were quiet. I stayed inside mostly, and when I did go out, I stayed in the backyard where no one could see me from the road. I kept the blinds closed. I watched cars more closely. I even memorized the shape of that sedan, just in case. And then 5 days later it returned. I didn't see it pass by. I didn't hear the engine. I just looked up from the kitchen one morning and saw it. Parked. In the driveway. Again. Same spot. Same stillness. No movement. This time, I backed away from the window slowly and went straight to my parents' room to use the house phone. My hands were shaking. I called 911. I told them everything, that the car had shown up again, that I didn't know the man, that I was home alone. They said an officer would come by immediately. When I got off the phone and went back to the kitchen, the car was gone. Vanished in the time it took me to cross the house. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. I explained what had happened. Gave them the best description I could. They drove around the area, but didn't find anyone matching it. They told me to call again if I saw the car. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up, heart hammering, convinced I'd heard something outside. I looked through the blinds again and again. Nothing. And then the next morning, it escalated. I was walking down the hall to my bedroom, bowl of cereal in hand, when I caught something in the corner of my eye. Movement. Outside my window. I turned and nearly dropped the bowl. He was there. The man. Standing right outside my bedroom window. He was just feet away, separated from me by a single pane of glass. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared. We locked eyes. He wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. His eyes were gray. Cloudy. Cold. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just watched me. And then slowly, very slowly, he backed away. Not turned. Backed away. One step. Then another. He walked backward across the lawn, across the driveway, into the street. Then turned and walked away down the sidewalk. Not hurried. Not afraid. Like he knew I wouldn't follow. I ran to the phone and called 911 again. The police came quickly this time. They searched the neighborhood. They didn't find him. There were no tire marks in the driveway. No footprints in the grass. But I know he was there. My parents believed me. At least, they said they did. But I could tell they were unsure. My dad said we'd keep the house locked up better from now on. My mom made me promise to stay inside while they were gone. Nothing like that had ever happened in our neighborhood before. And nothing like it has happened since. But I've never forgotten. Not the man's eyes. Not the way he moved. Not the silence of him. The utter lack of presence despite him being right there. It wasn't that he wanted something from me. It felt more like he had chosen me. Like I was marked in some way. And to this day, whenever I wake up in the middle of the night, not from a sound, but from a feeling, I find myself walking to the window, lifting the curtain just slightly, checking the glass, because part of me is still convinced. One day, he's going to come back. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the adrenaline rush of being home alone for the first time overnight. Maybe it was just hormones and teenage stupidity. Or maybe it was something darker, some reckless part of me that wanted to feel like I was in control of something for once. But I do know this. I was 15 years old, and I invited a stranger into my house at 1:45 a.m. And I haven't felt safe since. My parents had left late that night to go pick up my older brother. He'd gotten drunk at a friend's house and ended up needing to go to the hospital for alcohol poisoning. It wasn't life-threatening, thank God, but my mom called me around midnight and said they wouldn't be home until the next morning. She sounded stressed. I told her I was fine. And technically I was. I had the house to myself, and I planned to do what any bored, slightly stupid teenage boy would do. Stay up too late, eat junk food, watch stuff I wasn't supposed to. I was halfway through an energy drink, flipping through garbage YouTube videos, when I made the decision that changed the night. I went to a hookup site, one of those sketchy, clearly not legal sites that asks, "Are you 18?" with a yes/no button. I clicked yes and went browsing. I found her fast. Name was Ashley. Said she was 19, Asian, pretty, the kind of pretty that felt manufactured, too perfect to be real. Her profile said she was open to anything, the kind of line that reads like a dare. So I messaged her, told her I was younger than I was supposed to be. She replied almost instantly, "That's okay. I won't tell if you don't." 10 minutes later, I gave her my address. 20 minutes after that, she said she was outside. I stood at the front door, phone in hand, shaking slightly, both excited and terrified. I peered through the peephole. She was there. A young woman, short, long dark hair, wearing jeans and a black hoodie. She smiled when I opened the door. "You're Ashley?" I asked, voice cracking a little. "Yeah," she said softly. "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. She walked in like she'd been there before. Calm. Casual. Almost too confident. She didn't sit down, didn't ask where anything was. She just looked around, then asked if she could use the bathroom. "It's down the hall, first door on the right," I said, trying to sound cool. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like she could hear it. As she disappeared down the hallway, I turned to look out the front window. That's when I saw it. Her car was still idling at the curb. I hadn't even noticed it before. The headlights were off, but the engine was running. And in the passenger seat, someone was sitting. A man. He was wearing dark clothes, head turned slightly toward the house, staring at it. Not moving. Not checking his phone. Just sitting there. Watching. A cold wave of realization hit me. Ashley didn't come alone. And she hadn't mentioned anyone else. I backed away from the window slowly, my brain racing. Maybe it was her driver. Maybe he was just waiting for her. Maybe this was normal. But then I heard it, gravel crunching. Footsteps. From the side of the house. My backyard. We have motion sensor lights back there. I looked out the kitchen window just in time to see one flick on, illuminating a figure moving along the fence line. The man from the car. He wasn't just waiting anymore. He was coming around back. I panicked. My body moved before I could even think. I ran to the front door, shut it, locked the deadbolt. Then I locked the back door, bolted the sliding door, and closed every curtain I could reach in seconds. Ashley still hadn't come out of the bathroom. I crept down the hallway, heart pounding in my throat, and knocked on the door. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. There was a pause. Then she opened it. Her face looked different now. Less friendly. More annoyed. "I need to get something from the car," she said. "Wait here." Without waiting for me to respond, she walked down the hallway toward the door. But she stopped. Tried the handle. Locked. She turned slowly and looked at me. "You locked the door?" I nodded. "Why?" "I saw your friend," I said quietly. "Outside. In the backyard." Her face shifted again. No fear. No confusion. Just a moment of stillness. Then she forced a laugh, like it was nothing. "He was just coming to check on me. He gets protective." She turned back toward the door. "I'll be right back." She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. I watched her walk to the car. I watched her talk to the man. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw her gesture toward the house. Then they both got in the car and drove away. That should have been the end of it, but when I went to double-check the bathroom, I found her phone. She'd left it behind, sitting neatly on the edge of the sink. For a moment, I wondered if it was an accident. Then I looked at the screen. No passcode. Messages. Dozens of them. Weird contacts. No names. Just strings of numbers. Area codes I didn't recognize. Messages like, "When's the next pickup?" "Safe house clear." 3 in queue. "Confirm location." And one that said, "Don't spook him. He's young. Easy grab." My stomach flipped. I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I wiped the phone down, wrapped it in a plastic bag, and threw it into the dumpster behind the gas station down the road. I never told my parents. I never told the cops. I figured they wouldn't believe me, or worse, they'd ground me for the rest of my life. But I know what I saw, and I know what almost happened. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what they would have done if I hadn't locked the doors. If I hadn't seen the man. If I hadn't reacted when I did. I wonder how many other kids didn't. And I wonder what they meant by pickup. I haven't used one of those sites since. I barely use dating apps at all. And I still check every door twice, every single night. Because someone out there thought I was an easy grab. And they almost got it right. When you're 12 years old, being home alone feels like a badge of honor. It's that first real taste of independence. No parents hovering, no older sibling bossing you around. Just you, your space, and the quiet comfort of knowing you're trusted. That was how I felt the night it happened. My parents were out for the evening, dinner and drinks with friends. My older brother was sleeping over at someone's place across town. I had the house to myself for the first real time. They wouldn't be home until after midnight. I was fine with it. I felt grown up. I invited my friend Jason over to hang out. He lived on the next street over, so it wasn't a big deal. We stayed in my room, played video games, messed around online, and blasted music we weren't technically allowed to listen to. It was the kind of night that felt endless in the moment. But by 9 p.m., Jason had to leave. His parents had a strict rule, home before 9:15, and he didn't want to push it. We said a quick goodbye, and I walked him to the back door. I watched him disappear into the night, jogging off toward the sidewalk. No cars, no wind, just a quiet Thursday night. I shut the back door behind him, but didn't lock it. I figured I'd check it before going to bed, and anyway, I was still buzzing from the sugar, music, and noise. I went back upstairs to my bedroom, sat down, started clicking through games again. The house was silent now, and that kind of silence, after all the noise, felt loud. 5 minutes later, I heard it. The back door, opening. I froze. Then footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Just one set. I relaxed a little. It had to be Jason. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe he came back to grab his jacket or a charger. It made sense. The timing fit. But as the seconds passed, something started to feel wrong. He wasn't calling out. He wasn't stomping up the stairs or laughing or saying, "Dude, I forgot my," like I expected. He was just walking, slowly, through the living room. I left my bedroom door open and leaned into the hallway. "Jason," I called. Silence. Then footsteps again, coming up the stairs. Each step measured, heavy. Not like Jason. Not like a kid at all. I stepped back into my room, closed the door quietly, locked it. My heart was hammering. I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear breathing. And then footsteps again. Someone walking down the hallway. Stopping. Right outside my room. I backed away from the door. And they just stood there. Whoever it was didn't try to open it. Didn't knock. Just lingered. I heard them shift their weight once, a soft creak of the floorboard. Then finally retreating footsteps. Back down the hall. Back down the stairs. I couldn't move. Every instinct was screaming at me to call someone, do something. But I didn't want to make a sound. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, just listening. Eventually, I crept across the room, opened the drawer beside my bed, and pulled out the cordless phone. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered, "There's someone in my house." She asked me questions. I gave her the address. She told me to stay quiet, stay safe. Officers were on their way. I crawled under the bed and stayed there. I could hear nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the thudding of my heart in my ears. And then sirens. The most beautiful sound I've ever heard. I came out when the officers knocked on the front door and announced themselves. They swept the house. Checked every room. Opened every closet. At first, they didn't find anything. My story sounded shaky. I could see it on their faces. They believed something happened, but maybe not what I'd said. Then they went into the basement. And they found him. A man. Hiding behind the old water heater. Crouched. Silent. No weapons. No explanation. He wouldn't speak. He just stared at them as they cuffed him and walked him out of the house. He wasn't carrying a wallet. No ID. Nothing. No signs of forced entry either. Which meant only one thing. He came in through the back door. The one I hadn't locked. My parents arrived just as the police were finishing up. They were horrified. My mom cried. My dad looked like he wanted to punch the wall. The police couldn't explain what the man was doing there. He didn't take anything. Didn't try to harm me. Didn't try to escape. He just entered, walked upstairs, then hid. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. He didn't ring the doorbell. Didn't knock. Didn't shout. He just let himself in. Moved silently. Watched. And then tried to blend into the house like he belonged there. The scariest part? The police said he might have been watching the house for days. Maybe longer. Maybe he saw Jason leave, assumed the house was empty. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice. Or maybe, and this is the one that still keeps me up, maybe he knew I was there. And that was the point. My parents were the overprotective kind. The call us when you get there, call us when you leave, call us when you think about breathing wrong kind. So when they told me they'd be out of town for the weekend, a full 2 nights away, and that I'd have the house to myself, I was shocked. You've been responsible lately, my mom said. We think it's time. They were visiting family a few hours away, staying with my aunt who had just had surgery. I was supposed to be at home, doing schoolwork and not inviting anyone over. I nodded, promised to behave, and meant it. Sort of. The first night I stayed in. Made a frozen pizza, curled up on the couch, scrolled endlessly through TikTok, and fell asleep around 1 a.m. with the TV still on. No incidents. No drama. The second night? That's when it started. I wasn't planning to sneak out. I really wasn't. But my friend Bella texted me around 7:30. Party at Luke's. Just down the street. Come out for a bit. I knew I shouldn't. I told myself I wouldn't stay long. Just a quick stop, say hi, then be back before anyone noticed. My parents weren't due home until Sunday evening, so what could go wrong? I grabbed my hoodie, my keys, and slipped out the door. I didn't lock it. That's the part that still haunts me. I always lock the door. My whole life, my mom drilled it into me. We live in a quiet suburb, but she treated it like downtown Manhattan. You don't want to invite trouble, she'd say. That night, I invited it. I was only gone for 2 hours. Barely that. I didn't drink. I didn't even sit down. The party was loud, crowded, too much. I left around 9:45. The street was dark when I got home. The porch light I'd left on was flickering faintly, like it couldn't decide whether to stay on or give up. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me. Only then did I remember I hadn't locked it. My stomach dropped. But the house was quiet. The living room was exactly how I'd left it. Dishes in the sink, TV remote on the couch, lights on low. Nothing seemed disturbed. I exhaled. Probably fine. Still, I walked through the house. Just to be sure. Living room, check. Kitchen, check. Back door locked. Windows shut. Everything was normal. Except for one thing. The hallway leading to my room felt different. Heavier. Like the air was thicker. I chalked it up to nerves and went to bed. That night, I dreamed about lines. Red ones. Drawn across my walls. Across the floor. Wrapping around the bed frame. Some looping, some straight. Some pulsing softly like veins. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. 3:12 a.m. I turned on my bedside lamp. Blinked. Sat up. And stared at the wall. Because just above the light switch, small, faint, and dusty red, was a line. Straight. Horizontal. About 5 inches long. Drawn with something chalky. I got out of bed slowly, walked over, and rubbed it with my thumb. It smeared. My body went cold. I checked the rest of the room. Nothing else out of place. Closet fine. Windows shut. No other lines. I told myself it must have been old. Some stain. Something I'd never noticed. I got back in bed and didn't sleep again. The next morning, the line was still there. Worse, there was another one. This one was in the upstairs hallway. Longer. Following the baseboard, almost like it was tracing a path. Same red chalk. Same dusty texture. I bent down and examined it. Rubbed it. Same smear. I checked every room. There were more. A short one near the laundry door. A half curve on the tile in the downstairs bathroom. One in the garage, faint but real. All of them red. All of them new. I started to feel sick. I opened the junk drawer in the kitchen and dug through everything until I found an old box of sidewalk chalk I knew we had from years ago. Pinks, yellows, whites. No red. I checked the trash. Recycling. Outside. No broken sticks. No chalk dust. Nothing. Around 11 a.m., the phone rang. Not my cell. The landline. It never rings. No one calls it anymore. I picked it up, confused. Hello. Silence. I waited. Then the faintest breath. Not mechanical. Not distorted. Just breath. Slow. Measured. Human. I hung up. I stared at the receiver for a long time. It didn't feel like a prank. It didn't even feel like someone trying to scare me. It felt like someone checking in. I didn't leave the house for the rest of the day. I couldn't. I was too wired. I started following the lines, trying to map them. They weren't random. They flowed across thresholds, beneath doors, downstairs, always drawing toward something. Or away. By nightfall, the lines had doubled. One traced the entire perimeter of the living room. One curled under the dining table like a snake. Another ran across the floor, stopping inches from the back door. But that door was locked. I checked it again and again. It was definitely locked. At 10:04 p.m., the phone rang again. Same number. Same silence. This time I didn't speak. I just listened. And after a long pause, I heard it. A whisper. "Where did you go?" Click. I ran through the house like a maniac, turning on every light, checking every closet. I even went into the attic. Empty. Silent. But the lines were there. Longer. Brighter. Sharper. And one was drawn on my bedroom door. Like it had been tagged. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lamp on, baseball bat in my hands, listening. And at some point I heard it. Soft footsteps. Not inside. Above. In the attic. But I just checked. I stayed frozen until sunrise. The lines were everywhere now. Running up the stairs. Looping around the coffee table. Circling the kitchen island. And one stopped at my bedroom door, again. But this time there was a note. Folded neatly on the floor. No envelope. I picked it up with shaking hands. One sentence. "I walked the line you left behind." When my parents got home that evening, everything stopped. The lines faded, like chalk washed by rain. Not gone completely, but softened. Smudged. Faint. I didn't tell them everything. Just enough to make them take me seriously. We replaced the locks. Installed a camera. Got rid of the landline. But I never figured out what it was. Who or what I let in. It didn't break a window. It didn't pick a lock. It came because I left the door open. And it walked the line I left behind.